I got a flat belly.
This is, but when you're getting ready to say, because asthma is one of those things you have to look at, this was a website that I found that actually has some interactive things that you do with patients who have asthma. Kim, can you turn one of those lights out so it's still the I don't know which one it is. It might be good.
Do both or just one?
You got one in the middle. Yeah. You might be able to see it a little better.
No.
But if you go to this website, it'll actually go through, it's like a patient scenario. So, and then it goes, there's different ones that are up there. So this one is a one named Carol, but if you went to the basic page where it says more case studies, they bring up more that have to do with respiratory. Okay, so you have a lot of different people who have asthma, and when you click on them, you'll actually be able to click on this, whichever person it is for whatever topic that you have, and then you can go through them, kind of like your RN patient reviews and case studies, and then you can answer questions on those. So Carol is going to talk about asthma education, so another reinforcement. They didn't have one for COPD, I tried. And this one is actually from England, so sometimes they write stuff and you're like, what are they talking about? So it's a little bit different. But it'll tell you about their history, what she's going through, what she's actually doing, and then it'll give you questions as you go along and you have to answer those. It also gives you rationale for why that's the right answer. So I will send you, I actually made a copy of the, I was cutting and pasting stuff to send you all, so I'll send that to you in an email so you can actually go to the site and do it, because it's kind of nice, and you'll have some other things that each one of them gives you an opportunity to look at that aspect of education, monitoring a brand new diagnostic patient who has asthma. So different things that you can do as far as teaching with your patients. Also something, if you, in the future, as you're going along, if you have a project for your class that has to do with community service, or you have to do some patient teaching, perfect thing to actually just bring into your presentation that you can actually do for somebody about stuff, you know, with respiratory things. Some things that you go to, they're not really the most up-to-date kind of stuff, but this one is actually pretty nice about stuff that goes on with respiratory. Like, what's weird about it is most of the stuff that you get that's interactive comes from other countries. The United States stuff is just information. It's kind of different. But a lot of the things that I found that are interactive that let you answer questions come from Australia, UK, that kind of stuff. So it's just different. I don't understand that, but that's one of the things that you see. You can also go to the CDC website and they give you information about, that's where I got this one from that I gave out today, but you get to see information on there. They have stuff about COPD as well, but it's a little bit different. It makes you, at first, divide up emphysema or chronic bronchitis, and then you can get patient teaching stuff. There's always a PDF file that you can look at which has the latest information about it. But that's how you can bring in research and that kind of stuff about what you're doing as far as your patient care and patient education. But that's just one of the sites that it has interactive stuff. The other thing, now we're going into our hematology stuff. And so I also went to the CDC website to look at HIV infection and infection rates. There's a special page that's just related to HIV and AIDS and what people are doing as far as treatment and care goes with HIV patients. December 1st is World AIDS Day, so that's when we usually hear a lot about testing and screening for people who have HIV disease and to see if they have AIDS. But one thing that's interesting is that some of the information that is coming out about what we're seeing with patients as far as infection rates and that kind of thing goes from December 15th of last year shows that we have some declines going along, which is a good thing. We had a decline, a big one in African American women, because that was a big category that we looked at for HIV infections. We still see it kind of hold steady for people who are older, because of course they're doing stuff they should, you know, they can do their thing, but they're not doing it with a condom kind of thing. When you're not worried about getting pregnant, they're not using the same kind of things as far as protecting themselves. But this is HIV page on here is a good page to get information about what is new, what is trending as far as HIV treatment. And that's one of the big things. I know it's part of what you do as your classwork, but what's really interesting, especially because of where we live, if you live in the South, you're 35% more likely to be HIV positive than any other place in the country. And that's a scary thought process when you think about that, especially if that is single. You think about what? I have to screen everybody kind of thing. Yes. It's one of those things that unfortunately you have to think about in relationships, because it is something you have to, especially if you want to have children, that kind of thing. But the website is set up nicely so you can click on things for information. There's also, if you want to do handouts for people about prevention, all that kind of stuff, you can actually see it housed on the CDC website. Now, one of the things that came out on the 15th of last month, so they have new opportunities and expectations for what we're doing as far as treatment of patients who have HIV. But this is the big thing about what the targets are for 2020. Everything is always set up when we talk about initiatives as far as health always goes in 10 years. So we had Healthy People 2000, Healthy People 2010, and now we have Healthy People 2020 is going to be in that. So there's 12 initiatives that are going to come out regarding HIV care. The major ones, the first 5, they actually put up here. I know you can't see the list target over there. I can't even read it from up there. But they want to increase the percentage of people living with HIV who know their sero status to at least 90%. So they want more people to know they're HIV positive so that they can actually prevent the spread of the disease. Increase the percentage of newly diagnosed persons linked to HIV medical care within 1 month of their HIV diagnosis to at least 85%. So they want to have patients who are diagnosed actually in some type of treatment program. There is a website that talks about HIV that says if you, I can't remember the name of it now, I have to send it to y'all, that talks about are you having questions about your care? And then it says, now these are people that already know they're HIV positive, so they're thinking should they go on meds or should they not? So they actually have set up some informational sites so that people can actually get information about medications, treatment, and making the best decisions about that. Because probably one of the biggest things that you see as far as that goes is that you have people who have HIV who've been alive for years, HIV AIDS, and who've been alive for years. We used to see that only with people who had money. But now you see a lot of people living that way. Because Magic Johnson, you never know, had AIDS. Because he was you wouldn't know. Because this is a healthy looking person his whole time that he's been HIV positive. You never know anything about that. But that is something that not everybody has the opportunity. He had a lot of money. He's worth like $600 million. So that, for him it's not a big deal. But for that person to try to figure out how they're going to pay for their medications, that's a whole other story. But they want to make sure that people actually, once you diagnose it, you actually start getting treatment quickly. You want to increase the persons who are diagnosed with HIV infection who are retrained in HIV medical care or retained in medical care to at least 90%. So once you start getting treatment, that you actually stay in it. You increase the percentage of persons with diagnosed HIV infection who are virally suppressed to at least 80%. That means they want to get your viral load so that you're actually not showing expression of disease. Reduce the death rate among among persons with diagnosed HIV infection by at least 33%. And then reduce disparities in the rate of new diagnoses by at least 15% in the following groups: gay and bisexual men, young black gay and bisexual men, black females, and persons living in the southern U.S. So we are in that group. So we're a target group for patient education. One of the things that you'll find out about HIV infection, if you did not know, there's a lot of stigma that's still associated with that, especially, it's everywhere, but especially in the South. One of the things that I did for about 2 years, I did for a clinic, we actually had to go out and do patient education, and we were doing it primarily with people of color in their communities. And one of the places that you had to go to was the barbershop, which was a very interesting experience. I've been to the barbershop before with when my brothers were smaller, that kind of thing. But it's very different when you're a grown woman. They don't see you just in there, so they're going to talk the way they talk about everything. So you're in there and you have to tell them about safe sex and all this kind of stuff. And the first day I went, I just wanted to die because I was like, too many guys, because it is a barbershop, and I know that. There's just too many of them together. They're going to get started. Well, you can have one or two of them, you can get them contained, but it's a whole bunch of things. So this is just going to be a mess. So what's interesting though is that they do listen to you. They're listening to every single thing you say, and if they really do have some concern about something, I always want to pull you to the side. Hey, answer this question for me. So the very first time I did that certified, they listened to me. Some guy said, "Oh, I can't wear those things." And I was like, "Huh? What are you talking about?" And so you act stupid, just like everybody can wear a condom. There's no person that cannot fit in a condom. So that's where you just don't know. I'm not trying to listen to you talk about this right now, but I'm like, if I could have turned red, I would have been right there. Kind of thing. So you sit there and you talk to them still, and show them you understand what they're talking about, but there's all different sizes, all that kind of. You have to go through all of that. So some of them are very particular. They want to do every single thing. So you got to talk about lambskin and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, really? We have to talk about this and all? It's just like, oh, it's not what I talk to with people I know. So why would I talk to people I don't know about this? But it's part of the health teaching that you have to do. So it was my trial by fire was that first class that I taught, and then after the fact, one guy came up to me and said, "You just don't understand. I really cannot wear one of these. They're too small. This kind of thing." And I was like, no, that's not true. I said, because I've done this with kids. Kids is easier because they're kind of afraid of you as a grown-up kind of thing. Not all of them, but some of them are. So I said, I've done this demonstration before for kids, and every person can wear a condom. I don't care what you're saying. So he says, no, they can't. I said, okay, let me show you. So then you take out the condom and you put it over your hands to about your wrist. Or try it down here, but you're going to get a condom. And I said, if you have something bigger than this, it's wrong. Kind of thing. All right. So if you put a condom all the way down here, you're saying that you can't do that, something is wrong with that. So then I probably went back about 3 weeks later and all that. He said, I have to apologize because you're right. I went and bought some and yes, they fit. I said, you mean you're this old and you've never bought any? He says, no. I said, do you know your HIV status? I just asked him outright, do you know what your HIV status is? And he said, no. And I said, well, I think it's about time that you in your life do some testing to see whether or not you are HIV positive. I said, I'm not trying to put the bad mouth on you or anything, because that's the other thing. You're trying to make me know I'm not. It's just that if you were out there doing things, the possibility is you could have been doing things and catching things as you go along. So it is one of those areas that sometimes sensitive people talk about because the vast majority of people get it through sexual contact. You do get people who get it through needles. With the advent of needle exchange programs, that number is actually going down in patients. So you got people that are using IV. Don't get me wrong, they still get it. But the numbers have decreased significantly from patients when we first started seeing HIV patients that were IV drug users. Not that they don't, but it's just a big drop in the number of people that have it. The major groups that we still kept seeing numbers of people go up were African American women between 16 and 35, Latino women between 16 and 35, and then the elderly who you never thought were doing anything, who are out there having a good old time. Those are our greatest numbers of people. So in our area, the concentration that we see that has the highest or new incidence of HIV infections tend to be in the villages, which is up near Gainesville type area, Sun City, which is a little south of us, the Hialeah, Miami area, where you see a lot of that. That has been our epicenter for this state always anyway. So those are the areas in our state where you see a lot of infection going on still as far as infection goes. But that whole idea that this is something that was published just last month about anybody who lives in the southern states, 34% more likely to be HIV positive. It's worse because you see that's like 3 times what you would think in the normal population of our United States that are actually going to be HIV positive. So understanding the whole process of disease and how HIV happens is what's going to be important. Now, going back into your memory banks, way back in, if you were in the healthcare system or you were anywhere around listening to what was going on as far as your keeping up with the news, some of y'all were having a good time because y'all were living things. Y'all was trying to enjoy life. You weren't really caring about news coverage, that kind of thing. We found out that there was this kind of thing going on, and they called it initially the gay plague because it was killing off gay men initially. We didn't really know what was going on. What you saw is that there was a overall decrease in the immune response to men, and they primarily were gay, homosexual men, or people who dipped on the other side at other times. So what we saw was a large group of people, and the epicenters at that time were San Francisco. Miami was in that group too, and New York. That's where we saw the vast majority of cases of people who presented being HIV positive. We didn't really know what was happening. We didn't really know why these people were getting sick, because they were young, healthy people initially, who now then ended up with this disease process. So what ended up happening in the progression of what happens with the disease, we started to figure out and isolate some behavior associated with it. And that's where they got the things that try to figure out where it comes from. You figure out that yes, it more than likely comes from sexual activity. So that's how we got that whole thing about figuring out where HIV, how it's being spread and passed. Because you look at what the risk factors are associated with people, you look at their habits, behaviors, that kind of thing, and then you get a picture of who is the likely person to have this disease. And so from those behaviors, that's what we found, is that it more than likely came from people having sex with someone else. Because I will tell you, we went through the whole gamut during that time. If you were working in healthcare, you knew that if you had a patient who you thought, because we didn't know what it was initially, you had to put on everything. It was like you were going to the OR to go take care of a patient. You had to put on a bonnet, you had to cover your shoes, everything, taking care of these patients. And so then we got a diagnosis of it, human immunodeficiency virus. So that's where HIV comes from. We were able to test for it. It was something that we saw in these patients that tested positive. But then it was a progression of the disease. You saw these people had a decreased immune response, but then they started to develop opportunistic infections. So that's when your CD4 count goes below 200, or you have the presence of opportunistic infections. That's considered diagnostic for AIDS. So it's a continuum. I can have a person that's infected, so that's the person that's had exposure to the virus, and now you develop antibodies, so that's why you do testing to see if that person is positive. And then once you do that, your immune system over time is going to get weaker and weaker and weaker because this virus is replicating, taking up all the normal function of your immune system. And then you start getting opportunistic infections, meaning that those things that normally a normal immune system would be able to fight off. Because as a nurse, and you're taking care of patients, part of when I was doing my nurse practitioner hours, I worked in 2 clinics. And so anytime you had a person that came in with recurrent yeast infections, that, were just awful. They would come in and you just see yeast in the mouth, yeast in the vaginal cavity. You're doing stuff where you just got what's wrong, kind of stuff. That's how bad it was. But if you got a person that keeps coming in with recurrent yeast infection, that's when you either test them for diabetes or AIDS. That was the thing that we got into the habit of, because that's what you would see. Because yeast is something your body usually keeps in check. The only time yeast gets out of check is if your immune system is not intact or you're taking antibiotics. That's why you can get a yeast infection after an antibiotic, because it changes your flora. So you don't keep everything in check like it's supposed to. So we started seeing these people having what we were considered infections that normally would not cause you a problem that was killing them. Yeast was one of them. Candida was a big one that we saw. We also saw CMV, which is cytomegalovirus. Cytomegalovirus also causes blindness. So a lot of times they would come in with visual problems, that kind of thing. You find out. And that usually, for people, usually comes from cats. Cats scare things. Okay, but that was also one of the things if a patient has HIV, you have to get rid of your cat. That's not a good thing to have. But we saw CMV retinitis, CMV infection in the brain. So that would actually have a patient's more like they were a person who had a stroke or had mental disorders, that kind of stuff. So this actually makes like Swiss cheese out of your head kind of thing. So it's not a good thing to have. Then we had patients who would have Kaposi sarcoma, which was a type of cancer that is usually seen in old Jewish men. And you would have this happening in people who were 25 years old, who were Caucasian, African American, Asian, whatever it was. And these people were having a disease process that normally happens in old Jewish men. So that was another thing. Kaposi sarcoma looks like ectomotic areas and can be anywhere on your body. So you had some people that had isolated areas, and then you had other people who had big conflagrations of cancer just over everything. So we saw these people having this, and then of course we saw their lifespan greatly decrease. Because if you have an infection that is overwhelming, you can't fight it off, you had people that were dying. So that's the big issue with it when we first saw the things that were happening with HIV. And I do remember those days when we didn't know what was happening, we didn't know what was gonna, you didn't know what to do to take care of people. We didn't know what was happening. You had a lot of people who were nurses who actually quit because they didn't want to take care of these people, because they don't know where it's coming from. People are thinking it's coming through the air, and we didn't know back then. So you can understand where some of the hysteria came from. Once we figured out what was going on, though, we actually can test people for that. Do a blood test on a person, and you'll see that they have HIV antibodies. Now remember, when you're exposed to HIV, then it takes your body a while to recognize this as foreign. You don't develop antibodies until about 2 weeks after the fact. The HIV infection has happened already. You usually feel like you have a viral infection, so a person is much like a cold, so general malaise, muscle aches, that kind of stuff that you would see with somebody who has a viral illness, but you don't start to develop antibodies in that until about 2 weeks after the fact. So that's the issue that you have. You have a person that sleeps with someone and doesn't even know they have antibodies yet, they can pass it on to somebody because you don't test positive for antibodies yet. So that's the craziness behind that. Now we know that there's an incubation period, so we know that's something that why you have to protect yourself if you're having sex with somebody, that you're protecting yourself with that. But there's a big issue about, we went through a whole thing in this country about whether we should tell people to do that. Because does that mean you're giving them the green light to have sex, or should they not? People don't have sex anyway. If people haven't figured that out yet, I don't know why. So what you want to do is make sure they're armed with the best information to keep themselves safe. So then after that came along, we found out we could do a test for it. So now we're going to talk about prevention and how we can prevent that from happening to people. And what we did go into was that safe sex is no sex kind of thing, so total abstinence. But if you're going to do, because that's the safest sex of all, is not doing anything. But safer sex is that you're going to use condoms, and you always make sure you put a barrier between you and the person that you're having contact with. That you stop doing IV drugs, or that you don't share needles with other people. You always want to make sure you use an actual product that had, if you were doing condoms, you want to use one with spermicide that had minoxidil 9, because it actually helps to kill the virus off. HIV virus itself is rather weak. If it's outside the body on the surface and it's still wet, it can be passed on it for about 2 hours, but it's still going to be less than if you gave it less likely to cause contamination for you if it's outside the body. But to actually live on a surface, it's dead in about 2 hours, and if you put bleach on it, it's dead already. So that's how some people believe that you bleach it right after you have sex, that does that. People do crazy stuff, I'm telling you. All right, they think that's how you can cure it once you do something you shouldn't be doing. All right, I'm not saying you shouldn't have sex, but doing a bleach douche is not good because something's going to happen. People do stuff, so you don't want that happening ever in life. But when then we started testing people, of course, and now we actually, if you do, there's other things that have changed over the years as far as testing goes. Before we just test you because I have a suspicion of doing that, now it requires that you give pre-test counseling and post-test counseling for any person that's going to be tested for HIV. It's not optional. That means the person's going to come in, they can't just go say, I just want to do an HIV test. I mean, they do that stuff on, that you just send in for somebody to do. But if you were doing it at a place where you want to do a blood test, they're gonna say, you need to come in, let me talk to you, talk about your risk factors. What they're doing is patient education. And then you're gonna get your consent signed, get your blood work done, and then you don't get your results over the phone, you don't get them in the mail. You have to actually come in and sit with somebody and talk about your results. That's required by law now, here, anyway, in state Florida. So you just can't do wackadoodle testing, you have to actually have pre and post counseling with your testing plan. The other thing about HIV testing is even though they do one test, they always do a second test to confirm. Okay, so they do the ELISA test that they will do for testing, and then they can do PCR testing. And even though one is, it may say it's positive right now, they're still going to do another one to confirm. And then when that person gets that diagnosis, that's going to be, that person now becomes a statistic in a way. You don't want them to be like a statistic in a bad way, but the thing about it is it's a communicable disease, so they're also reported to the health department. And that person they now start to contact sexual partners. That's the part that's difficult. Because now you have to tell people how many people you slept with, you know their names, all this kind of stuff, so they can contact you. Which, as a healthcare worker, is very dangerous kind of stuff. Because that's, you gotta go knock on somebody. They don't send that in the mail. They send somebody actually out to the house of the person to knock on the door and say, you were reported to be a sexual partner of a person who is tested positive for HIV. We need you to get tested. You find out that that may be somebody's wife or husband. You find out that that may be somebody who didn't know that this had happened, and they're trying to ask you who that person is, and you can't tell. So all you can tell them is that you were tested positive. But then that person starts thinking, who is this? It brings up a lot of stuff, scary stuff, for the person that goes to tell them and all the people that you know, because you never know what people are doing. They just can't. So it's just one of those crazy things that happens. Now, once you have a person that's HIV positive, the thing, especially what they want to do with the directives that you see up there, is that you want to start a patient on medication. And what you start them on medication for is to stop replication of the virus. Okay, so it's a virus. The crazy thing about HIV and why it's so problematic is what we call a retrovirus, meaning that it changes every time it replicates. If it stayed the same and made the same picture every time, we cure it already. But what it does is make itself different every single time. So that's why you have to give medications early. Because if you can decrease the response, that's part of the reason why. If you get a needle stick and a person has HIV, but you don't even get, you'll have a harder or more likely to get a transference that way if it was a large bore needle. People worry about insulin needles. Insulin needles are so small and the lumen is so tiny that it would be rare, very rare for you to get HIV infection after giving somebody a shot with that. What you have a problem with is if somebody took a 14-inch needle, like a spinal needle, that had blood in it, and you backed up against a table, you know what I'm talking about, put the plunger in it, plungers it, and it's all that blood's in your blood. That's more problematic, because you have a large bore, large volume of blood that's been injected in you. That's more likely that it will cause a problem. So those people, when something like that happens, they take you immediately down to your employee health. You start on drugs then, because the sooner I can get them in your system, the more likely that I can hopefully stop you from seroconverting. That's what they're trying to do. So that's why you have all that stuff about why you have to have health insurance and all that kind of stuff when you're in a program, is because if something like that happens to you while you're in a nursing program, they want to be able to treat you right away. So that is unfortunate, but that's, there were people that converted that way early on. Some doctors, there were several physicians, orthopedic physicians, dentists, that kind of thing, who had extracted blood from, abscesses and that kind of stuff, and they ended up getting HIV from that. It's kind of weird, but that's what we heard about with some of the first cases of provider transmission, when they didn't have other risk factors. Because of course they're going to investigate that. Some people tell you they don't have risk factors, they live in a whole nother life that you don't know about. Because there are some people that go to work every day that you don't know are heroin addicts.